cybercrime came into existence. Why? Because the factors of illegal activity associated with technology. Every single e-commerce activities that we are doing, the data comes into a very big question. The taxes are collected on the basis of each citizen's social security number. Good morning and welcome to the session 4 in Unit 4 Commercial Law, where we're going to talk about cybercrime. This is in continuation to our Information Technology Act. Why? Because we are trying to understand cybercrime in depth, and there's a lot of things for us to understand in terms of the Information Technology Act of 2000. So the first thing is that we all know what is exactly cybercrime is all about. This is also called as a computer crime, which is where you're going to use it to create some sort of illegal things using the digital world altogether. So this involves all kinds of activities, starting from committing a fraud or a trafficking, or when you are going to talk about anything like stealing of intellectual property and other factors. Now, cybercrime, especially through the internet, has grown in importance. Why? Because today, every single e-commerce activities that we are doing, the data comes into a very big question. People are asking whether you are going in terms of entertainment, or you're going in terms of e-commerce, or in terms of government. The data and the data factors of hiding it, the data privacy factors altogether, is getting into a very great level altogether. So that's why cybercrime is a big topic, and it is a central topic today in terms of understanding it. Now, because of the early and widespread adoption of computers and internets in the United States, most of the earliest victims and villains of the cybercrime are the Americans itself. Now, I'll just notify this particular point altogether. Why? America is a leader in innovation, especially when it came to technology. No doubt about it, with the big giants like IBM and Microsoft evolving out of the United States. They were the forefathers in terms of the computing world. But what did this lead to? They were subjected to all sort of cybercrime and fraud also. So most of the victims who were the earlier victims in terms of cybercrime and fraud were the Americans. It's because America developed the technology. There were also people in America who used this technology on the illegal side, and they created a lot of problem for the common people. So I would definitely say here that the adoption of technology today at a stage where we have to be very, very careful as how we are using the technology, and how this technology needs to be guarded in all fronts as far as possible. Now, moving further, let me also highlight on this factor. By the 21st century, though hardly a handset remain in hamlet where, in the world that has not been touched by the cybercrime, but most of them have been affected altogether. As you start approaching towards the modern world, that is the 21st century, you can see that almost every corner of the globe, the cybercrime has gone and reached to such an extent that almost every single city, village or town has been affected by it. Very, very, very few people in this world or a region has not been really gone through the internet speed and internet age altogether. Remaining every one of us have become partially or fully a victim to the cybercrime, to the cyber mafia altogether. Followed by defining the cybercrime. That's what I really want to do it in terms of making you understand what is the difference between a normal crime and a cybercrime. What actually distinguishes us when we talk about the traditional criminal activity versus the cybercrime. Now let's try to do it. One difference is that we are going to use the computer. Definitely that is the technological advantage or a disadvantage what you're going to talk. Using computer and getting into illegal activities is what we are looking in as cybercrime. But that is not sufficient. That is not probably the exact definition. That is not probably the exact distinction that we are talking about in terms of the cybercrime. Why? Because when you start understanding the technology factor, even in the traditional crime, technology is also used as a gadget. There are many other kinds of technology which are being used to create a crime. So in what ways actually computer comes into this picture? Why? Because criminals do not need computer to commit a fraud or a trafficking in terms of any other kind of factors or steal any identity. Why? Because when you have decided to do something malicious, when you have decided to do something wrong, it is possible for you to do it in any aspect, in any window, in any scheme altogether. You don't have to worry about it at all. But what is becoming more and more interesting is that how are we looking into this factor? Where is the distinction coming into picture? So as we go, let us try to understand the cybercrime in detail. The first thing, all those activities existed before the cyber prefix became very, very ubiquitous, which means to say that the cybercrime, especially involving the internet, represents an extension of criminal behavior along with some illegal activities. Now, cybercrime came into existence. Why? Because the factors of illegal activity associated with technology. So when you start looking into technology, if somebody uses technology for doing something unwanted, let's say that I'm going to hack into your account, I'm going to do something like stalking, I'm going to get into your account and start spreading some virus or some sort of malicious code altogether, that combination of technology with crime intention factors that starts coming in, that's where the root for cybercrime starts coming up. This crime on an ordinary day could have been done by any other method. Now, when I go and hit some person or when I do some sort of a gangster activity which leads to disruption in the society, that's called as a criminal intent altogether, no doubt about it. But when I do it with a lot of brain, with a lot of thinking, with a lot of technological advantage, a skilled, oriented way of cheating people or putting them into trouble, that's where cybercrime comes into picture. So I'm combining the illegal activities with technology. That's what make me define a cybercrime altogether. Followed by the types of cybercrime that we are interested today. Let's talk with that. A spectrum of activities. At one end are the crimes that involve fundamental breaches, no doubt about it, on the personal or on the corporate privacy, such as assaults, the integrity on information held in digital repositories, use of illegally obtained information, a blackmail from a firm. All these things are possibly one of the factors that we are trying to understand in terms of cybercrime. Why this is becoming important? Again, let's try to analyze in depth and try to understand. When I involve about the cybercrime, it starts from a basic level. It starts from a common man altogether. And that common man is you and me. Starting from hacking your personal account, starting from hacking your ideology, your factors altogether, you could probably get into any sort of activity altogether, any sort of matter altogether, which would lead you to this kind of activity, which could lead you to this kind of functionality altogether, followed by also at this end, a spectrum of growing kind of theft to identify the theft. No, for example, if you start looking, the crime rate in cyber world is going on to a very great extent. Most of us might have heard about the dark web or the areas where shady transactions are being talked about. Now, the midway along the spectrum of this transaction-based crimes are fraud, trafficking, digital piracy, money laundering, counterfeiting. What we are trying to do is that this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm not really going in terms of the hardcore cyber crimes. What we are trying to do is that make use of the minimum technology, make use of the minimum skill, and try to just evade into this factors of privacy and create a confusion altogether. So that's where we are seeing the cybercrime coming in a very big way altogether. Followed by, these are the crimes with which specific victims, let's say, but the criminal hides from the relative anonymity provided in terms of the internet. The only thing that has been really, interesting about it is that I'm going to fake my identity. I'm going to not disclose my identity. I'm going to be in the dark, and I'm going to destroy the life of others by invading into their privacy, by invading into their system. So this is definitely going to be a very, very interesting part to talk about. This is definitely going to go in terms of understanding how a minimal usage of technology can probably lead into such sort of problems, into such sort of activities altogether. Followed by the types of cybercrime that we are talking about. The other type involves individuals. Now let's talk about that. Individuals within the corporations or government bureaucracies deliberately altering data either for profit or for political objectives. We have seen in n number of movies, both Hollywood and Bollywood, how spy and agents work within the organizations, trying to destroy the organization by manipulating data, by sending out that data, by doing all sort of functionalities on the data. And this actually leads into a huge loss, both from the data, both from an intellectual perspective, also from the profit side. With that, we also have at the other end of the spectrum are those crimes that actually involve to attempt that disrupt the actual working of an internet. Now, this is one thing which is getting quite serious in India. Why? Because let me just put in a word here where I want to understand if you could disrupt the entire system. Now, I don't want to just make money. I don't want to just reach the Hall of Fame just like that. What I want to do is that I want to destroy the system. I want to create a chaos. I want to create a confusion to the world of internet. If I could halt the internet, if I could terminate the connection, if I could just hold the speed for some time, I could just choke the entire network. That is what I really look at. So the other end of the spectrum has got a very clear malicious intent of destroying the spectrum altogether, destroying the internet altogether. Now that's going to be a severe kind of cybercrime that we are talking about. Now this starts from spam, hacking, denial of service attack against specific sites, and the acts of cyber terrorism. That is what the internet caused for the public disturbance altogether. Now that is going to be even more interesting. Why? Because when we talk about this cyber terrorism, this is a new way that has started coming to create public disturbances where you start sending agitated messages and different kinds of signals altogether to create public confusion. Now, moving further, the need for cyber law. The cyber terrorism focuses upon the use of internet on the non-state factors. In fact, the September 11, we can never forget, of 2001, the 11/9/2001, if I have to put it in the American style, what they call it as the 9/11 altogether. This was the attack that was planned altogether. Now, if you try to understand, this is what the number exactly means altogether. Now, always, please, let's try to understand that moment this kind of attack happened 20 years back on the United States, when the Twin Towers just came down crumbling like a pack of cards altogether. That was the beginning of cyber terrorism. Why? Because they started creating an awareness saying that from any corner of the world, from any part of the world, your city can be attacked. Your city can be put into trouble. So that's where the need for cyber law started on a very severe mode, because people started understanding that by using technology, yes, you can cause disruption in the world. So cyber terrorism is one of the biggest area, one of the biggest concern today in every walk of life, because everybody wants to see that this cyber terrorism has to be controlled at some point. Followed by the cyber crime also affects both the virtual and the real body, but then the effects of each are different. Why? Let's see here. The phenomenon is clearest in the case of identity theft, when I'm just going to hack you, take up your account number altogether. In United States, for example, individuals do not have an official identity card, but a social security number that is long served as a de facto identification number. Like how we have the Aadhaar card, one of the most important identity for Indian citizens. Similarly, for the Americans, even though they don't have an individual identity, but the SSN, the Social Security number, by default acts as an identification. That's the base for an American to get into picture. So that's considered to be a very, very serious and important data. Now, the taxes are collected on the basis of each citizen's social security number. So that is the amount of importance that we need to understand. And many private institutions use this number to keep a track of their employees, students, and patients, of course, because we use it for multiple purposes in the United States. And according to the individual social security number of offerings, now let's say that you are going to get some sort of benefit or you are going to get some sort of concession from the government. All these things are based on the social security number. So once that citizenship, that ID is being destroyed, and even the entire system is completely taken for a toss, that citizen will not be able to do anything because his identity is completely hacked. The same thing applies even to a credit card. So moment if any of this kind of activity happens, this leads to a complete toss. So that's why we need to understand how to reduce this entire activity. Now, moving further, let's try to talk about the internet fraud, which is being talked in a very great length. Now, the famous Nigerian 419 scam that happened, which denotes to this factor how they were able to swindle crores and crores of money using the internet. Although this particular con personality used it with both fax and traditional mean, it was given a new life to the internet altogether, because this is one of the famous case where you would have seen that using a fax and an email, he was able to cheat hundreds and thousands of people and take away their money from the account. And in that, the individual receives an email asserting that the sender requires help in terms of transferring a large sum of money out of Nigeria or another distant country. This is quite an interesting factor. You just receive an email in random saying that somebody wants to transfer hundreds and millions of dollars to your account and you need to help him out by giving your account number. But the moment you give the account number and all other factors to him, you will see that that person will immediately take all the account money from your account and he would have hacked out all the details from you. So that's the famous internet fraud that we are talking about, followed by the wire fraud. Now, what is this wire fraud that we are talking about? As we talk about the internet technologies coming into picture, the international nature of cybercrime is particularly evident with the wire fraud. This is the largest, the best organized fraud that we can think about, which was orchestrated by one of the leading Russians. What we have is Vladimir Levin, a Russian programmer with a computer software firm in St. Petersburg. Now, this is a very, very important case altogether. Vladimir Lenin was one of the person who started up doing this activity in 1994. With the aid of dozens of confederates, Levin began transferring about some 10 million from subsidiaries of Citibank North America in Argentina and Indonesia to the bank accounts in San Francisco, Tel Aviv, Amsterdam, Germany, and Finland. According to Citibank, all but 400,000 was eventually recovered as Levin's accomplice attempted to withdraw the funds. So now what happened is that, imagine the brainchild of what this person has done. He is using an internet technology, a wiretapping scheme altogether. Using this, he transferred $10 million from a Citibank account to the various places across the globe. But unfortunately, what happened is that as the people tried to recover money, take the money out of it, Citibank was able to detect the fraud and they were able to recover only $400,000 altogether. So this is where you see the wire fraud. What happens is typically you start wiretapping, finding out the details, evacuate the hack performing, and then finally you pull out all the details from the net. Followed by the international nature is also so important that we have to understand this psychology. With this, we come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the important details about the cybercrime and fraud would have been of a great help and beneficiary to you. In the upcoming sessions, we shall try to understand more about the cybercrime, the data privacy, and the laws that are governing there. But until then, stay tuned, stay enlightened, and stay blessed for all. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.